These three countries will collapse. Baba Vanga saw it coming. What if the world as we know it is standing on a fragile thread ready to shift in ways no one saw coming? In a time when technology connects us faster than ever and global power seems stable on the surface, three nations may be quietly slipping toward collapse while others rise from the shadows. A mysterious prophecy, once whispered across Eastern Europe, is now echoing louder than ever. Baba Vanga, blind mystic of the Balkan Sonce, predicted moments in history that still chill the spine. And according to her followers, she foresaw something dramatic, a coming fall of global giants. In today's episode from The Journey of Wisdom, we explore what this prophecy could mean for our world and why these three countries once seen as immovable might soon face their greatest test yet. Number 1. Who is Baba Vanga? Baba Vanga, often referred to as the Nostradamus of the Balkans, remains one of the most mysterious and widely discussed prophetic figures of the 20th century. Born in 1911 in what is now North Macedonia, she reportedly lost her sight during a powerful storm in childhood, a traumatic event many believe triggered her intuitive gifts. Over time, she became known for her visions and predictions, many of which have stirred both awe and skepticism. Though science generally regards her prophecies with caution, her followers insist that several of her forecasts ranging from global disasters to political upheaval have indeed come to pass. Her legacy is woven into countless stories of warnings delivered to influential figures and hints about dramatic world events, both past and future. As we look at today's shifting world landscape, her words continue to echo through conversations about where humanity might be headed. Among the many predictions attributed to Baba Vanga, one particularly compelling forecast stands out: the collapse of three significant countries around the year 2025. Though she didn't name them explicitly, her followers interpret her warnings as referencing economic and political shocks that could shake the foundations of these nations. This notion, while chilling, also prompts us to reflect on the fragility of modern power structures. In an age of rapid change fueled by globalized markets, technological disruption, and climate instability, it's not far-fetched to consider how quickly the tables can turn. Just as some nations are rising from obscurity to become influential players on the world stage, others that once seemed untouchable are showing signs of deep internal strain. The balance of global power is more fluid than we often admit. To truly understand why certain countries may falter while others ascend, we must look beyond headlines and consider the deeper, interconnected forces at play. Economic health, population dynamics, institutional trust, education systems, access to natural resources, geographical position, and technological innovation. All these elements form the invisible backbone of a nation's strength. But these same factors, if mismanaged or neglected, can just as easily lead to decline. Take excessive national debt, for example. It doesn't just weigh down an economy, erodes public trust and limits future growth. Similarly, an aging population can put immense pressure on social systems, just as decaying infrastructure or divisive politics can paralyze progress. The warning here is not about fearing collapse, but about recognizing that no country is immune to the consequences of poor decisions and neglect. In this light, Baba Vanga's prophecy becomes less about doom and more about awakening a call to look inward at the health of our societies and ask whether we're building resilience or just maintaining appearances. For those of us watching from the sidelines, it's a reminder to not place blind faith in permanence. Things that seem stable to the economies, governments, even global alliances can shift rapidly if we're not grounded in wisdom, unity, and foresight. In your own life, this teaching reflects a timeless Buddhist truth. Change is inevitable, and clinging to what was will only cause suffering. Just as nations must evolve with integrity and mindfulness, so must we. Use this moment not to be consumed by fear, but to deepen your awareness of what truly sustains well-being, whether in a society or within yourself. If we focus on doing good, avoiding harm, and building compassion in every layer of our lives, we become more resilient, no matter what the future may bring. Number 2. The 3 countries at risk of decline. Throughout history, empires rise and fall, and even nations with rich legacies must adapt to survive the tides of change. Today, 3 countries once seen as pillars of stability and power now face a crossroads, and unless they confront their internal challenges with clarity and courage, they risk a slow and painful decline. Let us begin with France, a country known for its revolutionary past, immense cultural legacy, and enduring global presence. Paris has long been a symbol of art, intellect, and liberty, and France's contributions to philosophy, literature, and democratic ideals are deeply woven into the fabric of the modern world. Yet beneath this brilliant surface lies a fragile framework, a society often divided by protests and labor strikes, a heavy burden of public debt, and a political atmosphere where trust in institutions is eroding. France finds itself struggling to reform outdated economic systems while competing in a fast-paced, digitized global economy. The challenge is not just about numbers or policy, it's about restoring belief. If its citizens cannot feel heard, valued, and hopeful about the future, then the social contract begins to break down. To navigate this moment, France must not only push for economic modernization, but also reconnect with its people on a deeper level. In a world that moves quickly, the ability to innovate while honoring tradition could be the key to its revival. Connected by geography and shared history, Germany stands as the second nation in this unfolding story. Long viewed as the economic engine of Europe, Germany has built a reputation for discipline, quality, and strong institutions. From automobiles to engineering to education, it has led with quiet confidence. But now, the landscape is shifting. The transition to sustainable energy, a shrinking and aging population, and increasing competition from global markets are placing immense pressure on the very foundations that once seemed unshakable. Germany's reliance on exports, its greatest strength now, becomes a vulnerability in a world where supply chains are fragile and protectionist policies are on the rise. Without bold steps toward digital transformation, renewable innovation, and attracting young talent from abroad, Germany risks stagnation. And it's not just about economics. Societal fatigue and generational divides could grow deeper if leaders fail to inspire a shared vision of the future. For Germany, this moment demands more than efficiency. It calls for reinvention rooted in wisdom. In Buddhist thought, clinging to past forms leads to suffering. So too must Germany learn to let go of outdated models and embrace uncertainty with creative resilience. Crossing the English Channel, we arrive at the United Kingdom, a nation whose history has been written in voyages, victories, and global influence. From the British Empire to modern-day London as a financial capital, the UK has often stood as a symbol of political sophistication and commercial prowess. English is now the language of diplomacy, business, and culture across the world, and its parliamentary system has inspired democracies far and wide. Yet today, this once unified kingdom finds itself fractured both economically and socially. The aftermath of Brexit has reshaped trade relationships and exposed internal divisions between its constituent nations. The cost of living crisis, increasing political polarization, and wavering global partnerships all contribute to an uneasy national mood. If the UK wishes to maintain its relevance, it must reimagine its place in the world, not through nostalgia, but through cooperation, adaptability, and renewed ethical leadership. The teachings of impermanence remind us that clinging to past glories can blind us to present needs. For the UK, the path forward lies in rebuilding trust between communities, with international allies, and within the self-image of a changing nation. Real strength, as the Buddha taught, is not found in control but in understanding. These three countries, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom each, face unique but interconnected challenges, and their futures are not sealed by prophecy but by choice. The pressures they encounter are familiar to many across the globe: aging populations, loss of public trust, economic transformation, and climate imperatives. But from a Buddhist perspective, crisis can be a gateway to awakening. When old forms crumble, space is made for something wiser to arise. In our own lives, we often experience a similar pattern: times when everything familiar feels uncertain, when the old ways no longer serve us, and we are asked to evolve. This is not a curse, it is a calling. And just as these nations must listen deeply to the needs of their people and the planet, so too must we learn to listen within, to observe the signs of imbalance in our own hearts and minds. By cultivating awareness, compassion, and right action, we align ourselves with the flow of life, rather than resist it. The collapse of outdated structures, whether in society or the self, is not the end, but the beginning of transformation. Let this be a reminder: no matter how powerful a nation or person once was, only those who adapt with wisdom will endure with grace. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead in uncovering the powerful predictions shaping our world. Comment below with "Future Ready" to show you're tuned into the changes Baba Vanga may have foreseen. Stay with us until the end. There's still so much to reveal about the nations set to fall and those destined to rise. Don't miss a single moment of this eye-opening journey. Number 3. The three countries expected to rise. Let's talk about something both mysterious and deeply fascinating: the prophecies of Baba Vanga. Known as the Nostradamus of the Balkans, Baba Vanga was a blind mystic whose predictions have stirred awe and debate for decades. Among her many visions, there's one that stands out with unexpected hope. It's the prediction that three countries, currently rising quietly in the background, are destined to experience dramatic growth and transformation. So instead of doom and gloom, let's shift our gaze toward promise and progress. Now ask yourself this: what does it take for a nation to rise, especially in a world full of challenges, unpredictability, and rapid change? The three countries we're about to discuss, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Brazil, may not always dominate the headlines, but according to these interpretations of Baba Vanga's visions, they are poised to shape the future in powerful ways. Let's begin with Indonesia. This country is not only the world's largest archipelago, made up of over 17,000 islands, but also one of Asia's most quietly powerful economies. Over the last few decades, Indonesia has seen consistent economic growth. What's driving it? A rising middle class with greater purchasing power, a push from its leaders to modernize and expand its infrastructure, and a growing domestic market that's becoming increasingly attractive to investors. As global industries look for new, stable markets with strong potential, Indonesia is standing tall. It has begun opening up its industrial sectors, and that strategic shift is now drawing interest from around the world. Think about this. When a country balances tradition with innovation, local strength with global vision, doesn't that become a fertile ground for transformation? Indonesia, with its natural beauty, cultural depth, and now economic momentum, is proving that resilience, when combined with vision, can lead to real elevation. Now let's turn our attention to Vietnam, a country that shows how determination and reform can rewrite a nation's destiny. Not long ago, Vietnam was marked by war and economic hardship. But today, it's rewriting its story. Starting with market-oriented reforms in the late 20th century, Vietnam has rapidly transitioned into one of Southeast Asia's most vibrant economies. Its manufacturing sector is expanding at lightning speed, drawing in major global companies looking for alternatives to traditional supply chains. At the same time, its cities are becoming hubs of modernization, and the country is actively signing trade agreements that diversify its global connections. What's even more inspiring is Vietnam's commitment to innovation. Its rise in tech incubators and research centers is planting the seeds for a knowledge-based future. Can you see the pattern here? A country may be small in size, but if it invests in education, technology, and connectivity, isn't it capable of achieving greatness far beyond its borders? Finally, we arrive at Brazil, only country on this list, located outside Asia, yet full of potential just waiting to be realized. Brazil has long been seen as a sleeping giant, rich in natural resources, blessed with biodiversity, and home to a massive population. And yet, it has often struggled with political instability, economic swings, and social divides. But according to Baba Vanga's prophecy, Brazil may be heading toward a remarkable rebound. The vision paints a picture of maturity, a time when the country focuses less on short-term gains and more on sustainable development, equity, and innovation. Brazil's challenge is clear: build a development model that not only boosts GDP, but also uplifts its people and protects its environment. If Brazil can strengthen its institutions and channel its natural wealth into long-term inclusive prosperity, it could emerge as a leader not just in Latin America, but on the global stage. This raises a deeper question for all of us. What truly makes a nation strong? Is it power alone, or the wisdom to care for its people and land with foresight and compassion? As we reflect on the rise of Indonesia, Vietnam, and Brazil, there's a deeper lesson for every one of us. Growth, whether for a country or an individual, doesn't come from avoiding hardship. It comes from how we respond to it. These countries have faced conflict, colonization, crises, and complexity. Yet, instead of remaining trapped in those stories, they've begun writing new ones. This isn't just about economics or politics, it's about vision, resilience, and the courage to transform. And so, we are left with a powerful takeaway. No matter your history, your environment, or your present limits, there is always a path forward if you have the will to rise. So what can we learn from these stories in our own lives? Maybe you're facing struggles that seem overwhelming. Maybe you're trying to rebuild after a fall. Look to these countries not as perfect examples, but as living proof that progress is possible when we align values with effort, stay grounded in our roots, and dare to imagine something better. Whether it's a nation healing its wounds or a person finding new strength, the principle is the same. Real change begins within, and it grows outward with time, patience, and clarity of purpose. Which part of your life is ready to rise? Number 4. Analysis and commentary. In a world marked by constant upheaval and rapid change, the idea that some countries may rise while others fall is not simply a matter of ancient prophecy. It is a mirror held up to our own collective choices, our systems, and our awareness as global citizens. The widely discussed predictions attributed to Baba Vanga, which suggest that 3 powerful nations may soon face collapse while 3 emerging nations rise, should not be taken merely as supernatural foresight, but as a reflection of deep-rooted global trends that are already unfolding before our eyes. Much like the Buddhist saying, "Nothing is permanent, everything is subject to change," this forecast serves less as a verdict and more as a wake-up call. Throughout history, empires like Rome, the Ottoman Empire, and the British Empire were not brought down by fate, but by their failure to adapt it through ignoring the will of the people, clinging to outdated models, or becoming arrogant in their dominance. In today's volatile geopolitical climate, the same forces are at play: complacency, disconnection from the needs of citizens, and resistance to necessary transformation. In this sense, prophecy becomes reflection, and reflection becomes action. Indeed, the slow erosion of influence in traditional powers such as the United Kingdom, France, and Germany is not because they lack intelligence, history, or infrastructure, but because they may be struggling to reconcile past pride with present demands. Aging populations, rising debt, political division, and a lack of visionary leadership have created cracks in once robust systems. Yet, the Buddha taught, "With our thoughts, we make the world." These nations have the capacity to reinvent themselves if they turn inward with humility and outward with clarity. The question is not whether decline is inevitable, but whether reinvention is still possible. These countries have deep-rooted strengths, world-class education, research institutions, democratic systems, but these advantages must be actively nurtured, not merely inherited. Wisdom comes not from clinging to legacy, but from learning how to grow through change. And here lies the real spiritual test, not only for governments but for the people. Can they rise above fear and nostalgia and instead plant seeds of renewal? Meanwhile, nations like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Brazil offer a different kind of story, one of potential, hope, and caution. These are not overnight successes or miracle nations. They are countries standing at a turning point. Their youthful populations, expanding economies, and strategic relevance make them capable of emerging as leaders in a new world order. However, as the Dhammapada reminds us, as a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame. In the same way, these nations must remain grounded, avoiding the pitfalls that once trapped others: corruption, environmental degradation, inequality, and poor governance. The promise they hold can only be fulfilled if they approach development not with greed or haste, but with long-term vision, moral leadership, and social equity. Emerging economies are not immune to collapse simply because they are growing. In fact, rapid growth often brings instability, if not balanced by wisdom and ethical leadership. What they must remember is that true power does not lie in GDP alone. It lies in the well-being of the people, the health of the environment, and the integrity of their institutions. This brings us to a profound truth at the heart of both prophecy and Buddhist teaching. Impermanence is not a curse, it is a call. The shifting dynamics of nations remind us that nothing is fixed. Just as a lotus blooms from the mud, greatness can rise from struggle if it is met with resilience, learning, and action. This is why the message should not be one of fear, but of awareness. If we consider Baba Vanga's prediction deeply, we find not doom but opportunity, reminder that every generation inherits a moment where choices matter deeply. It echoes the Zen teaching, "The obstacle is the path." The real collapse occurs not when structures fall, but when people stop caring, stop learning, and stop acting. Whether you are a policymaker or a parent, a teacher or a student, the lesson here is clear. The future is not written in stone, it is written in actions taken today. So, what can we take from all this in our daily lives? The world is a reflection of our collective minds and hearts. If we want stronger, kinder, more resilient nations, we must become stronger, kinder, and more resilient individuals. Instead of focusing only on which countries may fall, perhaps we should focus on how to build communities that stand. Whether in government or at home, change begins with self-awareness, compassion, and responsibility. As Thich Nhat Hanh said, "The next Buddha may not take the form of a person. The next Buddha may take the form of a community." Let this be a reminder that in our small daily choices, choosing honesty over comfort, sustainability over convenience, service over selfishness, we shape not just our own futures, but that of entire nations. And finally, let us not forget, in every seeming downfall, there is the seed of rebirth. Civilizations, like people, can fall asleep, but they can also awaken. May we meet these times not with despair, but with courage and clarity, using both the warnings of the past and the wisdom of the present to shape a better world for generations to come. A prophecy or a wake-up call. When we hear the phrase national collapse, many people respond with fear, denial, or discomfort. But if we pause, breathe, and listen with a quiet mind, we might see these so-called prophecies not as doomsday predictions, but as mirrors reflecting truths that are already unfolding. They may serve not as threats, but as opportunities, a moment for reflection, humility, and transformation. In this section, we'll explore 5 core insights that Baba Vanga's vision invites us to consider, not just for the countries at risk, but for all of humanity. Through a Buddhist lens, we'll uncover how these warnings could be less about fear and more about awakening. Number 1. Collapse is not the end, it's a stage in the cycle. Collapse is not the end, it is a part of life's great turning, a stage in the ongoing cycle that all things must pass through. In the teachings of the Buddha, we are reminded of the universal law of impermanence, anicca. All things that arise will eventually fall, and all that is created will eventually dissolve. This truth is not a cause for despair, but an invitation to see change as a constant companion, not an enemy. The rise and fall of empires, civilizations, even belief systems, are no different from the changing seasons. Just as autumn is not the death of the tree, but its preparation for spring, the collapse of something long-standing, whether it be a government, a cultural norm, or a personal way of life, is not necessarily the end. Rather, it can be the beginning of something new, something more in alignment with truth. In this way, collapse is not a prophecy of doom, but a wake-up call, a call to awareness and transformation. The Buddha once said, "With mindfulness, strive on." In other words, even as things fall apart, we must not lose our awareness or fall into despair. We must continue with purpose, awake and aware, knowing that each end holds the seed of a new beginning. When we understand collapse as part of the natural rhythm of life, we no longer resist it with fear. Resistance only adds suffering. The more we cling to things as they were, the more pain we feel when they inevitably change. The wise learn to let go. There is a Zen story of a monk who asked his teacher, "What is the path?" The teacher replied, "Everyday life is the path." This includes all the rises and all the falls. In modern life, many feel that things are unraveling politically, environmentally, socially, and it's tempting to see it all as a tragic end. But if we apply the Buddhist lens, we might instead ask, what is being asked of us right now? Perhaps what we're seeing is not just collapse, but a mirror reflecting the consequences of disconnection, greed, and ignorance. And in that mirror, there is an opportunity not just to mourn what's lost, but to respond with wisdom, to step into a deeper sense of responsibility and compassion for one another. As the great Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh said, "When you plant lettuce, if it does not grow well, you don't blame the lettuce. You look for reasons it is not doing well. It may need fertilizer, or more water, or less sun." Likewise, in times of societal decay, the invitation is not to curse the world or fall into hopelessness, but to investigate with care what needs healing, what have we neglected, where can we return to harmony. This is where individual transformation becomes collective healing. The more we awaken in our personal lives practicing kindness, choosing truth over comfort, letting go of selfish patterns, the more we become a force for renewal in the larger world. So rather than fear collapse, let us meet it with eyes wide open. Let it strip away what is false, and give us the courage to build again, not from the ruins of the past, but from the clarity of the present moment. As Rumi wrote, try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. Let the end of what was be the soil for what might yet be, and may we walk forward together with wisdom, courage, and love. Number 2. The root causes: greed, hatred, and delusion. The Buddha taught that the roots of all suffering, whether personal or global, stem from 3 powerful poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. Now, think about what's happening in the world around you. Can you see how these poisons show up in the headlines, in our communities, or maybe even in our daily lives? Greed shows itself through our endless hunger for more wealth, more comfort, more control. It's what drives overconsumption, the reckless exploitation of nature, and a widening gap between the rich and the poor. When companies put profits above the planet, or when we buy what we don't need while others go without, that's greed in action. Then there's hatred, which burns through society in the form of division, blame, and violence. We see it in political polarization, in the rise of extremism, in the way people are dehumanized simply because they look, think, or believe differently. Hatred breaks down the trust that holds communities together. And perhaps most dangerously, there's delusion, the fog that keeps us from seeing clearly. It's what causes us to deny reality, ignore science, and turn away from truth. Delusion is what happens when we let fear or comfort blind us from taking meaningful action. It's what allows us to scroll past suffering or silence the voices that challenge us to change. So when we look at the chaos in the world today, climate disasters, economic instability, wars, and social unrest, we see random misfortune, or are we seeing the reflection of our own collective mind? This is where Baba Vanga's prophecy takes on new meaning. What if her words weren't just predicting doom, but offering us a chance to wake up? Could it be that these warnings are actually invitations not to fear what's coming, but to take responsibility for what is? The Buddha never said the world was doomed. He said we are not helpless. As he put it, just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life. This spiritual life begins with self-awareness, with asking the hard questions. Where in my own life do I act from greed? When do I let anger control me? Where am I choosing comfort over clarity? These questions aren't meant to make us feel guilty, they're meant to wake us up. Because once we see the poisons, we can begin to heal them. And when enough of us choose healing over harm, awareness over ignorance, we shift the energy of the whole society. So let's be clear, the state of the world is not just about politics, economics, or fatates, about the human heart. It's about us. If we want real change, it starts with the small, honest decisions we make every day. Are we generous or grasping? Are we kind or reactive? Are we curious or stuck in our own version of the truth? The lesson here is simple but powerful. The outer world reflects the inner world. When we clean up our minds and hearts, when we let go of selfishness and fear, we begin to create a world that's rooted in compassion, clarity, and peace. That's not just hopeful, that's possible. So ask yourself today, what part can I play in this great transformation? Because whether it's a prophecy or a wake-up call, the time to listen deeply and with intention is now. Number 3. History's true survivors, those who choose humility. Throughout history, the real survivors, the ones who not only endured collapse but rose from it stronger, have not been the nations with the biggest weapons or the richest economies, but the ones that had the courage to humble themselves and learn from their darkest hours. When we look at Japan after World War II, we see a country that didn't just rebuild cities, it rebuilt its spirit by choosing peace over militarism and innovation over destruction. Germany, in the painful aftermath of fascism, didn't hide from its shame. It faced it, acknowledged the harm done, and made a conscious effort to rebuild with democracy, education, and remembrance at its core. Rwanda, after one of the most horrific genocides in modern times, did not give in to endless revenge. Instead, it focused on healing, national unity, and forgiveness, turning trauma into a commitment to never again walk that path. What do all these nations have in common? They chose humility. They stepped back, looked honestly at what went wrong, and asked, how do we move forward in a wiser way? They didn't just reconstruct buildings, they re-examined their values, their systems, and their relationships with one another. And that kind of inner rebuilding is what creates real resilience. So what does this mean for us today, in a world that often feels like it's cracking under pressure? Can we say we are learning from our mistakes? Are we simply repeating them with better technology? The Buddha once said, to understand everything is to forgive everything. But understanding begins with humility. It begins when we, as individuals and as nations, are willing to drop our pride and look inward, asking, where have we gone astray? What truths have we avoided? What wounds have we refused to acknowledge? No country is doomed to fail by destiny, but no country is guaranteed to last just because of its history, power, or wealth. Survival doesn't belong to the strongest, it belongs to the wisest. And wisdom, as we've seen, often grows from the soil of humility and reflection. So I ask you, are we as a society making space for that kind of wisdom to rise? Or are we still clinging to being right, to being the best, to avoiding discomfort at all costs? There's an old Buddhist saying that goes, the only real failure in life is not to be true to the best one knows. So perhaps our real strength lies not in how high we can rise, but in how honestly we can reflect when we fall. If we're facing a wake-up call, and many signs suggest we are, then the question isn't whether we will fall, but how we will respond when we do. Will we blame, deny, and distract ourselves? Or will we slow down, take responsibility, and humbly walk the path of renewal? The lesson here is clear. Those who choose humility plant the seeds of long-term peace and prosperity. And maybe the most powerful thing any nation, any individual can do today is not to assert its dominance, but to courageously admit what needs to change, because only through that honesty can real transformation begin. If this message touched something in you, share your voice below. Comment with this simple truth: humility is strength. Let's remind each other what truly helps us grow. Number 4. Governments may lead, but people are the foundation. We often look to governments, presidents, parliaments, and political parties as the drivers of a nation's fate. But the real strength of any country comes not from the top down, but from the bottom up. It lies in the people, their values, their actions, and their willingness to care for one another. A government can collapse, and an economy can falter, but when the people remain rooted in compassion, mindfulness, and community responsibility, there is still a solid foundation to rebuild upon. It's easy to point fingers at leaders and institutions, but we must ask ourselves, what kind of society are we co-creating through our daily choices? The Buddha once said, if you light a lamp for someone else, it will also brighten your own path, reminding us that when we act with kindness and integrity, we not only help others, but also illuminate our own way forward. When people withdraw into selfishness, indifference, or apathy, society begins to crack from within. But when individuals take responsibility not just for themselves, but for the well-being of their neighbors, their communities, and the environment, then even the most unstable systems can be supported and uplifted. History has shown that revolutions, reforms, and meaningful change are often driven by the collective spirit of the people, not just by political leaders. Whether it's through voting, volunteering, or simply choosing to treat others with respect, every action matters. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "You may never know what results come of your actions, but if you do nothing, there will be no result. In modern life, where it's easy to get overwhelmed by the noise of news cycles and global problems, we can start by asking ourselves a simple question: what is one thing I can do today to support the kind of world I want to live in? That might be listening more deeply to others, supporting local communities, speaking up for truth, or raising children with awareness and empathy. The future of a nation is not only built in government halls, but in homes, schools, markets, and conversations. The lesson here is timeless and powerful. While governments may lead, it is the character and consciousness of the people that determine whether a nation rises or falls. Number 5. What's really collapsing? Not borders, but awareness. Let's look beyond the news headlines for a moment, not just at borders collapsing or systems breaking down, but at something much deeper, the quiet fading of awareness, empathy, and care. Because what's truly collapsing isn't found on a map, it's happening within us. You see, the real danger today isn't the fall of governments or the crumbling of institutions, but the loss of our inner compass, the erosion of our ability to truly feel for one another, to stay connected, and to treat the earth and every living being with sacred respect. Have we become so busy, so distracted, that we've forgotten what it means to care? Think about it. When was the last time we paused not just to consume or to react, but to listen, to understand, and to hold space for another's pain or joy? This is not just about compassion as a virtue, but as a necessity for survival. When we stop believing in community, when we no longer trust that our small acts of goodness matter, when the future feels like something to dread rather than something to build, that is when real collapse happens. So many of our problems today, climate change, loneliness, conflict aren't just external challenges. They're reflections of a deeper disconnection from what it means to be human. In Buddhist teachings, we are reminded that everything is interdependent. No tree grows alone. No child thrives in isolation. Yet, somehow, we've accepted the myth of separation, me versus you, human versus nature, success versus compassion. Can a society that ignores this truth sustain itself? And if not, what will it take for us to wake up not out of fear, but out of love? The solution isn't just in technology, policies, or even protest, but in a shift of awareness, a spiritual revolution. A return to mindfulness, to remembering that our thoughts shape our world, that our actions leave ripples in the lives of others, that our presence matters more than we think. So, I ask you, what are you doing today to stay awake? How are you nurturing your sense of connection with your own heart, with your neighbors, with this fragile and beautiful planet? Because if we truly want to avoid collapse, we need to rebuild not just our systems, but our spirits. The good news? This kind of rebuilding begins quietly, simply with attention, with kindness, with choosing to see others, not as strangers, but as part of us. Let us not wait for things to fall apart before we start to care. Let us care now. The lesson here is simple yet profound. Real strength is not in walls or weapons, but in awareness. Empathy is the foundation of a thriving future. And when we choose mindfulness, we begin to heal not only ourselves, but the world around us. As we've seen, the collapse of nations, just like the challenges we face in our own lives, is not the end, but often the beginning of something new. Whether it's the fall of familiar powers or the rise of new ones, the real lesson lies in how we respond with fear and resistance, or with wisdom and transformation. Baba Vanga's visions may stir curiosity and even concern, but from a Buddhist lens, they offer something deeper, a mirror reflecting our collective choices, our values, and the urgent need to live with awareness, compassion, and courage. So let this be your reminder. While nations may shift, what truly shapes the future is the consciousness of their people, of you and me. real change begins within. If this message resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who might benefit, and subscribe to The Journey of Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming reflections and stories. Together, let's keep walking the path with open hearts and awakened minds. Until next time, stay grounded, stay kind, and stay wise.